to the through development of trails, parks, and other open spaces along the river that can be designed by communities to fit their needs and goals. And this bottom picture here shows, This bottom picture here shows a really active bicycling group called We Keep You Rollin' in the Golden Gate community along the river that has priorities for connected trails for biking and walking.
Where's the Golden Gate community?
Yeah, really.
And this is a map of the priority sites that were identified during the Little Calumet River Conservation Action Plan process. The green sites are parks and preserves, and the purple sites are what we called mixed ownership restorable. And the sites include some areas where high quality and remnant habitats still remain. For example, down here, this is Dalton Prairie, which is actually an Illinois natural inventory site. And several of the priority sites are owned by the Cook County, the Forest Preserves of Cook County and the Chicago Park District. And that also includes sites owned by industry, landfill, and some properties that have known contamination are included, as is like some vacant residential land and right-of-ways owned by the Chicago Department of Transportation, ComEd, and the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. So those are sites. And sites were identified as priority, and conservation targets and strategies were assigned to them, in part by looking at managed areas, open space, and vacant parcels along the river on an interactive map that we created for this project. And it includes map layers that illuminate the past character and the current condition of the habitat. You can see here, we have the boundaries of the priority sites outlined, and there's a bunch of other layers that you can turn on here too to help make decisions, like pre-settlement land cover, for example, was one, and water trails, land trails, public lands. We have a bunch of layers that we used here. And sites were also identified as priority, and conservation targets were defined also through visits and discussions with community leaders and site owners and managers. So we use both. This is a screenshot of the interactive map that has a layer from Friends of the Chicago River that shows a location of a catfish nesting habitat built into the sides of the riverbanks, locations where fish have been surveyed, these MWRD locations, locations where bats have been surveyed. You can see the little bat icons, and where bat houses have been installed. It also shows where an osprey hole has been installed. So these layers, were helpful with determining conservation strategies and targets for each site. And you can see here some of the sites are really thin sites along the river. This site here represents the Cleveland Cliff Steel Mill shoreline that we showed along with area ideas for restoration of the bank and shoreline enhancements. So we developed this site sheet
Golden Bee.
that we included in the plan. And you'll see some site sheet examples in a moment. We identified threats and opportunities for achieving the goals of coordinated restoration and community connections to the river. I'm going to talk about some of the opportunities later in the talk and how Openlands and partners are working to address them, especially in terms of creating welcoming spaces along the river and elevating significant history to bring positive event attention and investment to the river and its banks.
Openlands is doing a bunch of work.
So conservation targets for the priority sites include native ecosystems, as well as planting of pollinator-friendly native flowering plants. A lot of the sites that we identified in the plan would need soil remediation before historic communities could be established. But as I mentioned before, the establishment of pollinator-friendly native flowering plants is attainable at all sites. And conservation targets also included animals, some of which are declining species like the monarch butterfly and shrubland birds. Targets designed to connect communities to natural areas and the river were also priorities. And we included these as stewardship and creation of riverfront open space connected to adjacent neighborhoods, as well as recreational opportunities like biking, hiking, and water trails. So for each priority site, we created a site sheet that holds information about the site and recommended conservation targets and strategies. Here you can see part of the site sheet for one of the Cleveland Cliffs steel mill sites. On the map, you can see an area outlined. Let me see if I can, yeah, right there. That was an area that we were recommending for the planting of native flowering plants. There's actually another site sheet for the Cleveland Cliffs shoreline, a separate one. And also here on this slide, I also highlighted a project that was undertaken several years ago when the site was owned by ArcelorMittal, which was a prairie reconstruction that was done with the Wildlife Habitat Council and the Field Museum, that transformed a parking lot into a habitat with native plants, which helped reduce pollution, infiltrated stormwater, created wildlife habitat. And a field guide to the native plants installed at this site was made by the Field Museum and is available to the public. And I showed part of it here in terms of the native plants that were planted. And so this is included like as an example of what can be achieved at industrial sites, both in terms of habitat improvement and in terms of education. This is the entire site sheet for the Beaubien Woods Forest Preserve. And conservation targets here include restoration of the turf grass and the old field sites near the Beaubien Woods boat ramp, as well as wetland restoration. And this is a priority from the Conservation Action Plan that Openlands, the Field Museum, and the Forest Preserves of Cook County have started work on since the publication of the Conservation Act with funding from the Walder Foundation. So we're doing both prairie restoration and a build out of a community gathering space that the Field Museum has been working with a community curatorial committee to design and select proposal artists for. So this is going to be an area for community programming and a strong point of connection between the community and the river and the restored spaces.
Do anything about it? I can't do it.
And we're seeing Beaubien Woods like as an anchor and an example, of
We
restoration
can't
management
do it, sure.
and community connections to the river that can, be an inspiration and an example for other spaces.
Oh, sure.
So this is a detail map I made on Google Earth to show the restoration going on in Beaubien Woods, potential location for the gathering space with the Walder funding. I want to note the Field Museum, not the Field Museum, the Forest Preserves of Cook County is also doing other restoration at Beaubien Woods. So there's really several things going on. But this shows, this is the boat ramp, and this is actually the beginning of the African American Heritage Water Trail. And the gathering space will be at this location or this location. I think it's this location, but I'm not 100% sure. And we're doing prairie restoration on both sides of the access road here, taking the old field turf grass habitats,
Are you not?
turning them into and putting native plants there. Also,
Everybody's on you.
the project includes taking out some of the woody invasive plants. And there were dead ash trees here
Everybody's on you.
that have already been removed.
What
And
do you
also
do?
notable is that this project is also like improving the trail that leads from Carver Military Academy to Flatfoot Lake, especially at the beginning of it, to make it more inviting and improve sight lines by removing invasive woody vegetation from the beginning part of the trail. Let's see if I can. There we go. So some of what was included in the Conservation Action Plan evolved from planning that was led by the Forest Preserves of Cook County and the American Institute of Architects in spring of 2018. And the goal of this planning was to really help connect the communities immediately west of Beaubien Woods to Beaubien Woods, and also to the little Calumet River to the south. And so this is Beaubien Woods right here. This is Indiana Avenue. And this planning really focused on the communities of Atgeld Gardens, Golden Gate, and then across the rail line here, the complexes at Concordia Place, Pangea Lakes over here. So really how to connect these neighborhoods to the river. Even though the river is right here, there's really almost no public access to the river from these neighborhoods at this point. And there were few ways to get into Beaubien Woods. So the goal of that was to, to do planning and to figure out how to better connect. This was actually a conceptual drawing that came out of the planning process. Regional plans such as Our Great Rivers also emphasize like turning towards the riverfront and activating it for community benefit. So anyway, after the planning sessions in 2019, Openlands and We Keep You Rollin', the biking group in Golden Gate, did some surveys at community events and also at parent-child events at Du Bois School and Carver Elementary School to surface some of the community goals for open space along the river, and found that some of the goals included play spaces for kids, connected trails for biking and walking, and also places to learn about neighborhood history. And this is a conceptual drawing that came out of the Forest Preserve planning process as well, showing a space for community programs along the river. One of the surveys that we did at a biking event in 2019 indicated an interest in night sky and stargazing programs. And this actually represents a space that could be used for this as well as other types of programming. Okay, so this slide shows potential open spaces along the river. And they were chosen because they're clusters of land bank and city-owned parcels that could be acquired as open space, and because they front on the river, and some of them have the potential to improve water quality in the river and provide connections to the river for the neighborhoods, providing, you know, access to the river in these areas that has almost none. And these spaces are included in the Little Calumet River Conservation Action Plan. And we've last week had several meetings with community groups and community members about these spaces. And we will be having more meetings coming up. And this is in conjunction with Calumet Collaborative on how these spaces could be designed to meet community goals. So ecological restoration in these spaces, you know, would include removing invasive trees and planting native flowering plants, opening up views to the river, resulting in more inviting and safer and less secluded spaces. Planting native flowering plants would also, you know, help absorb and clean stormwater in these spaces. And the spaces could also help meet the community goals. This is actually, so space A right here is this is Du Bois School right here. So it's just south of Du Bois School. This is looking at some of the community goals. A fellow at Metropolitan Planning Council did sort of a conceptual drawing for us about what this space might look like. And it took some of the goals of like having benches facing the river, having a kiosk where community events could be posted, having lighting for safety. All of these things were things that we heard when we were talking to the community and that were folded into this conceptual drawing, as well as native flowering plants. So this is an example of the type of thing that could happen at space A. Space B was conceptualized as maybe a space that could be used as a biking center or a place for meeting for events in the neighborhood. And the bike box and container picture here is just an example of the kind of thing, you know, that might be included as part of space B. Space C here is the area where it's just east of St. Lawrence Avenue here. And it includes the historic Ton Farm Underground Railroad Safe House site. And it also includes areas that have been informally farmed for decades. And we've heard also there might be interest in community gardens in this area too, as well as the commemoration of the freedom seekers through this area, perhaps through signage or interpretive art. And I know Larry McClellan was the last speaker before me in Calumet Revisited, and I think he spoke about the Underground Railroad history in this area. And the site of Chicago's finest marina has been designated as part of the National Park Service's Network to Freedom Registry for Underground Railroad sites. So, so that is space C. And space D is just immediately adjacent to Beaubien Woods, and it shares a 18-acre wetland with Beaubien Woods that's actually fairly high quality in terms of the wetland plants that it supports. We've also heard interest in trails connecting Beaubien Woods to the Ton Farm site, and so that could be part went on at site D as well if it were acquired as open space. This is a historic picture of the Ton Farm Safe House site, and a little picture showing the archaeology, which was really just the digging of some test pits that Openlands, the Field Museum, or the Little Calumet River Underground Railroad project and some community members did with an archaeologist back in 2019. And so for sites C and D, with the goals of, also seeing the river, having the invasives controlled and maintained so that you could see the river, and having trails, and also having, a restored wetland area. This is just a picture that we took in the wetland of flowering plants. So, yeah, and so these open spaces, as well as offering community connections to the river, as well as offering places for restoration and improved water quality. These open spaces also offer potential for placement of interpretive art for the African American Heritage Water Trail, which presents a series of sites of national significance along the Little Calumet River from Beaubien Woods to Robbins. This is a picture of the map that goes along with that trail from the brochure that was created in 2020, which with each numbered site being a site of significance along the trail. For example, the Ton Farm Safe House site is on, as is Chicago's finest marina, which is the oldest Black-owned marina in the city of Chicago. So the African American Heritage Water Trail consists of a brochure and a story map that presents the trail and the associated stories and history. The stories were collected for it through a combination of meetings, interviews, and written material that was submitted by partners. And this picture shows one of our meetings at the Robbins History Museum in July 2019. And this is Tyrone Haymore from the Robbins History Museum. This is Larry McClellan, the Underground Railroad historian who spoke in the last lecture. And local historians such as Tyrone and Larry were really important to shaping the narrative presented in the Water Trail brochure. And other community groups present at this meeting also contributed narratives to the project. So the Underground Railroad Project, People for Community Recovery, Fresh, which is a fresh food project, we're all there as well, helping to define and present important activities currently going on in the neighborhoods for inclusion in water trail materials, such as biking activities and initiatives to educate people and improve environmental quality and water quality. So Openlands and partners such as Michael Taylor, who you can see standing here and instructing this child in kayaking, have been offering canoe-based cleanup of the Little Calumet River, and also kayak training annually for the past 10 years. And now we're going to be partnering with the Forest Preserves, and Friends of the Chicago River to offer guided tours on the water trail and to train local interns to interpret the trail and offer tours. And our goal is to get to a point where there's a local source of boats and a core of local interpreters. So that the water trail can offer educational and economic opportunities for communities, as well as recreation. The brochure and the online story map are pictured here, and these present the stories and events and initiatives that are part of the trail. Some of the themes presented in the African American Heritage Water Trail include the Underground Railroad, civil rights, the birth of environmental justice, neighborhoods, the Village of Robbins, and the Robbins Airport. And these are all really remarkable stories of African Americans who settled along the river. For example, the water trail materials tell the story of Hazel Johnson, who in the 1960s and 70s labeled the Atgill Gardens neighborhood where she lived a toxic donut and worked to hold polluters and government accountable for its cleanup. And you can see her here receiving a presidential award for her environmental justice work in 1992. And this is a screenshot from the online story map. Other important history included in the trail materials is information about the Village of Robbins, which is one of the few towns in the US governed by African Americans at incorporation in 1917. The Robbins Airport played an important role in aviation history as the first that was built, owned, and operated by African Americans. The school that was associated with the airport trained many African American pilots, including some of the first female aviators. And the pilots trained at the flight school went on to become Tuskegee Airmen, helping to secure Allied victory in World War II. So to raise awareness and build support and a sense of place, we've structured experiences with community members around experiencing the African American Heritage Water Trail. And we completed the materials, the brochure and story map in 2020, but we weren't able to hold any events the first season because of COVID. So we actually held our first public event on the trail in last August 2021. And these are pictures from that event. And for that event, we traveled from Beaubien Woods to Chicago's finest marina. And here you can see Ron Gaines, who is the owner of Chicago's finest marina, and Larry McClellan talking to the group from the docks about Chicago's finest marina and about the Underground Railroad history that took place right there at the town farm. And I think Larry was also talking about the Indiana Avenue Bridge, which was over the Little Calumet River at the location where the crossing was that many freedom seekers used to cross the Little Calumet River. So we had great attendance at this event, and notably the paddlers who attended the event, and notably the BBC sent reporters who did an article and made a film at this event. And that really raised awareness of the African American Heritage Water Trail. And I believe, directly influenced the New York Times naming the Little Calumet River as one of the 52 places for a changed world. I think both the trail and also restoration that has taken place along the Little Calumet River resulted in that designation, really bringing a lot of positive attention to the river in this area. So if anyone is interested in getting more involved, I just wanted to call out a few dates. On June, the Little Calumet River Day cleanup, where we have boats available. We'll be doing some interpretation around the trail as well, and the cleanup. And on July 30th, the youth interns that we're going to be doing paddling lessons with them, and also interpretive training, and helping them define what's of interest to them about the trail so that they can present it. And on July 30th, we'll be having a public event with those interns and their which I think will be held at Beaubien Woods and Chicago's finest marina. So that's another thing to look out for if you would like to participate. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so I'm Laura Barghusen, Blueways Director. You can easily get in touch with me just by doing paddle@openlands.org. You don't need to bother with my last name. I get the paddle emails. Yeah, I just wanted to leave you all with the thought that through this work, we're really trying to bring positive attention, investment, and restoration to the Little Calumet River. And, we really feel that this could be a model for what could be done along the whole Calumet and Chicago River system, in terms of greening the river banks, connecting people to the river, and improving water quality. And with that, I think I talked for a long time, but are there any questions?
Just remember to unmute.
Hey, Laura, do you see that Lynn has a question in the chat that says, what is between the spaces? Are there buildings, or is that open space too? So the map that has A, B, C, D on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's see. Maybe I should go back to ABCD. Okay, I don't seem to be able to get back to ABCD. All right, let's see if I can go there and share again so that I can.
That's okay. You don't have to show the map. You could just kind of tell us what's around those spaces.
Yeah, sure. Let me just see if I can show the map. Oh, I think, okay. So, yeah, so around the spaces, notably north of the space for the community park, there's some dilapidated housing that that the community has, indicated they would like to see maybe affordable housing redeveloped in those spaces. And along 134th Street, all those spaces were just between 134th Street and the Little Calumet River. And there is, housing along the street, and also some dilapidated housing along the street that they would like to see redeveloped. There's also some churches along the street. Yeah, so it's mostly churches and housing that's along there. Plus, there are undeveloped Chicago Department of Transportation right-of-ways and some partially developed Chicago Department of Transportation right-of-ways that we're also looking to see if in some cases those could be developed and used as trails or access points to the river. All right, let's see.
Are there other questions?
There's a question, any plans to better connect east of the expressway to the areas west of the expressway using bicycles and walking paths?
East of the expressway, what we have mostly been looking at in terms of bicycle and walking paths is ways to connect to the Major Taylor Trail and the Count Sag Trail. But the connections, that I know of to the Major Taylor Trail actually go west, go from Indiana Avenue west, and then also south on Indiana Avenue. So I'm sure that there are, I know there's a number of bicycle trail plans, but I'm much more familiar with ones to the west.
Can't hear you.
You couldn't hear me?
Yeah, that last little bit there.
Oh, just that I'm more familiar with the ones going west and south, and not so much going east, although I'm sure.
There are some bike paths that travel along the Calumet as it moves into Indiana. There's I think it's the Oak Prairie Trail, and there's also the John Beaniak Greenway. It comes on the east side, kind of, and also the Burnham Greenway, which goes over by Wolf Lake. But they're kind of not exactly directly linked with the Calumet. So
yeah, but it would be great to see, to really see the linking up of those bicycle trails to this area to bring people in. I think especially the Ton Farm site, really has the potential to be a destination. And so connecting it via bike trails to the broader region, I think would be really important, to bring people in.
right. I'm coming in late. And I'm so sorry for that. I was at a training and I came here as soon as I could. But where is the Ton Farm? What is the exact location of that?
It's do you know where St. Lawrence Avenue and 134th Place?
134th Place and what? In St. Lawrence, you said?
Uh-huh.
I'm looking
Yeah,
at
so-
the maps.
Yeah, that's where the historic Ton Farm site is.
And there's
Okay,
a,
oh, I know exactly where that is. Okay, so that's not too far from the Major Taylor, which does come through there. And they are talking about the Major Taylor will be a little farther south of there, but it'll definitely be going through kind of back by Beaubien Woods. So that's not far from that at all.
Yeah, and there's there's in the Riverdale multimodal plan, the 130th Street side path, which is really a high priority for the community biking group that we were working with for its development to
Yeah.
that people could travel between the Major Taylor Trail and neighborhoods on that side path.
Yeah. So your work, is it Dolores that you're working with when you're
It's
doing-
Dolores, yeah.
Yeah, she's really awesome. I just
Yeah.
like ed stuff for her. All right, so I mean that's exciting. That's really cool stuff. I'm so bummed I missed this conversation because I really want to learn more about this. We just got another kayak, so my daughter and I are starting to kayak the Calumet, and I'm like, oh, I want to know more.
Yeah, if you you know, are able to attend the June 4th cleanup or the July 30th event.
Mhm.
Have you? And you
Will
can just,
someone post that link? Someone put the link in the chat room for us.
yeah, actually, we don't quite have the form up for registration, but if you email me at openlands.org,
Okay.
I will have you on the list to receive the link as soon as it's up.
So you said, what were the dates again?
June 4th for the cleanup, which is a canoe and kayak based event. And then July 30th for the public event, which will involve the interns who we're going to work with this summer on interpretation of the trail. That would be July 30th. And I think that will be at Beaubien Woods.
Okay, so kayaking, okay, so I'm so sorry, I was typing this down. This is the 4th and the, what was the other date? The
July 30th.
July 30th. Okay.
Yeah, and just send an email to paddle at openlands.org, saying that you'd like registration links for paddling events, and I will send them to you.
Okay, thanks. I'm very interested. We have a canoe too, so we could bring canoes and kayaks into the mix.
Right, right. Great.
There's another,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's a question in the chat to just explain what is a right of way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a right of way. I believe it's like an area that that, you know, would have had a street on it, or at least in terms of the Chicago Department of Transportation right of ways, that those are, you know, strips of land that belong to the Chicago Department of Transportation, and that can be, and I guess usually are, developed as streets. But in these neighborhoods just west of Beaubien Woods, you know, some of them are partially developed, some of them are undeveloped, so you can see them, you know, as narrow strips on land ownership maps, but really nothing there. But those are areas that, you know, we have in mind to see if they could be developed as trails, because they're basically in public ownership and are not developed. And then right-of-ways like ComEd right-of-ways, notably through this area, you know, you can see also strips of land with power lines on them that are owned by ComEd, you know, and that are, you know, we actually, when we did the archaeology, looking for artifacts from the town farm, we were actually on the ComEd right of way doing that archaeology, and we got permission from ComEd to do that. So basically like open space that could be, you know, perhaps stored or developed as trail.
I might add something to the questions of better connections east of the expressway. I think the talks that are going on about Lake Calumet include some discussions on that. And but that is, these are just early discussions. So nothing specifically that I know of has been proposed. But I kind of think that's what will happen. And that's near Big Marsh. So I think anything coming from the west will end up somewhere near Big Marsh. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great. I see here a question about whether the red line expansion will affect the plans of Openlands in any way. You know, I think the red line expansion has the potential to, you know, bring a lot more people down to the area and to Beaubien Woods. You know, it may also spur development in the area. And so it's something that we're keeping in mind. And the restoration that we're doing at Beaubien Woods is actually going to be right next to the area where the red line comes in. And so, we're hoping that it is going to connect the areas better to the city, to bring people down, to see these areas, to be in the restored spaces. And if we get economic development and like some kind of paddling tours going, headed up by local people, that it might, bring people down who would actually take advantage of that and do those tours. So it seems like, it really has the opportunity to connect the area better to the wider area for, make it more of a destination.
And Laura, that's 130th Street. Does it come down that far?
It does. I think the proposed site now is actually even just immediately south of 130th Street, right next to Beaubien Woods, like
Oh.
literally right next to it.
Is that right? That's great.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Well, Laura, I want to thank you for your presentation, and we should have it. We recorded most of it. I missed the first part of it for some reason, but we'll have it posted probably within a week. So if anybody wants to, for those who weren't able to watch all of it, it'll be available for them. And I just want to mention that next month's speakers will be Wayne Jim, Jane Healy, who just arrived, Lisa Downs, she's still here, and maybe they'll have some students or scouts participating, and they will talk about the work of the Calumet Nature Exchange. So anyway, I'll see everybody on April 5th then, okay?
Good, thank you.
Everybody.
Have a good evening.
You
Thank you
too.
so much for coming and speaking. I'm glad I wasn't
Yeah,
here, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, Dave,
Yes, sir.
you're going to remain?
I'm going to remain.
Okay, and then we can talk then. I just want to end the recording.